Madison Reedy has joined me in the studio to talk business. New inflation figures out today. How is it looking, Madison?
This is the Consumer Price Index that landed today. It rose ever so slightly, just 0.1%. That's in the 3 months to March. Now that takes annual inflation to 1.5%. Now that's actually down on the previous 3-month quarter where it was 1.9%. Now this result was below expectations. The market consensus expectation was a 0.3% rise, and the Reserve Bank expected slightly lower, a 0.2% rise. They're obviously targeting that 2% midpoint inflation figure. Now, Statistics New Zealand said that this cooler result than expected was down to a huge rise in cigarette prices. Now, cigarettes rose 9% in the past 3 months. Now, that was induced by a rise in the tobacco excise tax in January, one of many that we've seen over the past couple of years. So one cigarette now costs $1.50. A decade ago it cost $1.50. A decade ago it cost just 54 cents, and even 3 years ago at the start of 2016 one cigarette cost $1.15. So there's some handy inflation figures for you. Food prices also rose in the quarter, as did housing costs, which we know they've both been rising pretty steadily. But interestingly, when you actually take cigarettes out of the picture, inflation in this consumer price index actually fell by the same amount, by that 0.1% figure. Now that's because of falls in petrol prices. Obviously they've been rising of late with the likes of the regional fuel tax in Auckland and high oil prices offshore, but they actually fell in particularly January and February. So for the quarter they were down 7%. Also international airfares were down 12% in the quarter. That's pretty much a seasonal change. They usually do come off a bit in the start of the year. Now the Economist's reaction to this one, ANZ, the country's largest bank, they say that the outlook is troubling. They're suggesting that this means that the domestic economy is running out of steam. A pretty similar note there from ASB. They say that the economy looks increasingly unlikely to be able to generate sufficient momentum. And although they do say Westpac had a slightly different note there, they said that the Reserve Bank could actually look through this result. So that's different to what ASB said. ASB are expecting that the Reserve Bank will will cause an official cash rate cut in May next month. They reckon that's on the cards, but Westpac says possibly not so likely.
Okay, a reputation index, we have such a thing, and has revealed what businesses New Zealanders like and dislike.
Exactly. So this is a research firm called Reputation Institute, a pretty obvious one what they do. They've created a list, they actually do it annually, of the 25 companies and how they rank based on their reputation. So at the top of this year's list was Toyota, number 1, in New Zealand, and the Warehouse Group. Now the top two there, Toyota and our national carrier airline in New Zealand, they've pretty much held those top 2 spots for a very long time. At the bottom of the heap was Fletcher Building, the construction company, and ExxonMobil, the oil company. In the middle of the list, though, interestingly, the banks, the major banks, particularly the Australian-owned banks, took a bit of a hammering. So BNZ, Westpac and ANZ all fell. ANZ fell the most by 12 points, from 4th place down to 16th place in just 1 year. It's a pretty large move. ASB did stay steady, though, at 6th place. Now, this is obviously a direct result of the Royal Commission of Inquiry across the Tasman in Australia. Now that found widespread misconduct among these Australian-owned banks' parent companies, and this is proof that their reputations have obviously been damaged in New Zealand, despite a review by regulators here finding that there was no widespread misconduct among their New Zealand-based subsidiaries. But we should also note that this was actually to the benefit of New Zealand's, of the largest New Zealand-owned bank, Kiwibank. They actually debuted on the list for the first time in 4th place.
Wow. What happened on the markets today?
The NZX Top 50 index rose by 0.75%. That's a rise of 74 points to close at 9,982 points tonight. The dollar is trading at 67.3 US cents, 93.6 to the Australian, and 51.6 British pence. Our currency was down about 1% against most of our major currencies after that consumer price index news this afternoon, but it has recovered a little bit since then.
Thank you. That's Madison Reedy, business reporter.